some of the latest trends that we've seen for prongs. Because if you're going to be making your engagement ring with us, obviously everything we do is custom, so you have the choice of selecting different styles of prongs. So we're going to go over all of them, the benefits and the cons of some of them as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Obviously, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump into it. So let's start with the classics. 4 prongs. So obviously that's the more traditional look. We have 4 prongs. There's also the option of turning them never eat soggy wieners, north, east, south, west. So that's actually called the cardinal setting, where it's basically like on the long. So that's a very good option to use if you were using like elongated shapes, kind of like an oval for example, because having them in that position will actually make it look even longer. This can also be interesting because cuts within certain shapes can actually be different as well. So you can have, for example, ovals that are rounder than they are long. And so generally, what I like the best is an oval that's a little bit more elongated, so it's a little bit longer than it is wide, because it just helps elongate the finger. And so if your diamond is very kind of like, I don't know, like chubby, same thing with pears, having that that prong setting where it's going to be elongated could be a really good option to consider. Of course, these styles of prongs can also be made with cat claws, also known as eagle claws. It's when basically you have like the traditional claw, but instead of being pointed, kind of like rounded at the top, it's actually going to be kind of like claws, so they're going to be elongated. I would say that it works best with like vintage jewelry or vintage inspired jewelry, kind of like boho. It doesn't look necessarily great on classic jewelry, but like that's the kind of thing that like if you are curious to see what it will look like with eagle claws or with just rounded ball points, you can always ask us, because when we're doing the 3D design for your engagement ring, we will always show you different alternatives, so we can render it with both style of prongs, and then you can just choose whichever one you like. What we've been seeing a lot with the traditional prong is more ornate prongs. So not necessarily on the top, but on the bottom we'll have, some people call them hidden halos, some people call them like petal prongs, whatever. But we can actually incorporate different shapes within the base of the prong. It's really pretty. It adds a little special something, I think, especially if you're going for, you know, a more simple design. Like if you're going for just like a solitaire engagement ring, sometimes adding those little accents can be really fun. Like you can do flower petals. We have a model called the Queen of Hearts where we actually make little hearts underneath, and these can actually be decorated with or without diamonds. So if you do want to add a little bit of extra sparkle, we can actually set diamonds along the prongs underneath. So it gives a very stunning look when you're looking from the profile. These types of more like ornate prongs can also be fun when you're doing gallery settings. So these aren't necessarily prongs, but I feel like they fit within the same spectrum. So I'm going to talk about them just because it's really cool if you've never seen it. So when you have like a halo engagement ring, so a halo basically what it is it's the center stone with a row of diamonds around it. Usually we add that to make the center stone look bigger. Kind of think of like Queen Diana's engagement ring. She had a blue sapphire halo engagement ring with the traditional gallery setting. It's when the prongs are basically attaching to like a bottom bezel underneath the shank. This sounds very technical, but I'm going to show images so you can see what it is that I'm talking about. And so those prongs that are connecting from the halo down to the shank, we can also create petals and different motifs as well. I'll show you a picture right now of one that we recently did with a Canadian diamond, and this was the same thing. Instead of having just like standard prongs, we actually added petals. So it gave more of like an original look. Also, the design was based on a flower. My clients wanted it to kind of resemble more of like a flower. That's why we chose to use bigger stones around the center stone, so it had more creases between the stones and less even. Alright, so now let's talk about prongs that are more than the standard like 4. Because you can really, honestly, you can have as many prongs as you'd like. You could have 6, you could have 8, you could have 10. The one thing that I would consider is that when you're going over 4 prongs, like if you have 6 prongs for example, I would recommend, it looks best on larger center stones, so like a carat and up. Just because when you have 6 prongs, it can start to swallow the center stone. It can start to be a lot of metal around a stone, and so if the stone is too small, it just kind of like disappears. That's actually one of the reasons why, like when I was working for other companies back in the day, we created a lot of Tiffany engagement rings, and their engagement rings tend to have very thick, very heavy prongs, 6 prongs a lot of the time, and I always just felt like, unless if you have a 2-carat diamond, it's just all metal. And so you really want to make sure that it's a little bit more refined, it accentuates the center stone and not swallows it. When you're working with larger center stones, like 2 carats and up, especially for cuts for like emeralds, radiants, Asher cuts, like right now I have an Asher cut, having 8 prongs, so 2 prongs on each corner, can look really, really good. I don't recommend it for smaller sizes because again, it will swallow the stone, but it has a very bold look, and if you want that bold look, you can definitely pull it off by adding these extra prongs. You can always have different colored prongs than your engagement ring as well. So this is not something that we see super commonly. I feel like two-tone colored golds in jewelry, it's not super on trend, but it is something that you can always ask for. So for example, if your wedding band is in white gold, we can always add, accents of, rose gold or yellow gold within the prongs or certain details along your ring. That is something that we can always do. And actually we recommend it if you have colored stones, for example, like yellow diamond, pink diamond. If your stones are a little bit pale, in adding those colored prongs, just the prongs, nothing else, can actually help intensify the color. So those are kind of like little tricks that we can also do if that is something that you'd like. One of the last things that we will touch on is bezels. I don't make that many bezels. I don't get asked for it super often, but bezels are fun in the sense if you want to have a really low center stone. So when you're making your engagement ring, you do want to keep kind of like your lifestyle in mind. If you're someone who's very, very active, you don't want to have your ring set super high. You want to have it like very low. And so by having a bezel, we're able to make it basically as low as possible. We can make it to the point where this tip of the stone almost touches your finger. And so if you have an active lifestyle, if you're someone like a nurse who's always taking on and off gloves, then it might be a little bit more practical for you in that sense. It can also make the center stone look bigger. So if you have a small center stone and you want to add a bezel around it, it will give it mass. If you have a stone that, has imperfections, putting it in a bezel can actually help hide this imperfection, okay? There's also semi-bezels. So bezels can be a little bit of, it adds more mass to a piece, right? But if you want something that's a little bit not as full, we can actually create a semi-bezel, where the bezel is basically just on each side and the middle is cut out. This will really help lighten up the piece. It also has a very unique look. And lastly, let's talk about designs that don't even have prongs. So these are generally reserved to bigger size gemstones. Like I really wouldn't do this even under like a 3-carat stone. It's also more seen, I feel, within cocktail jewelry, but it is a very glamorous look. So if you do want to try this, highly recommend. It's where we don't have prongs, but we actually have ribbons of metal that go over the corners of the stone to hold the stone in place. So this creates like a very cool look. It can also be embedded with diamonds. Other than that, there's also the option of having almost kind of like a channel set center stone. I feel like you don't really see this too often. For me, it has kind of like an old school look to it. It's where basically the center stone will actually be set kind of like in between 2 rows of metal. So a lot of the times we see it with a style, I don't know if you're gonna know what I'm talking about, but like you'll have like the center stone and then the metal will kind of like flow around it, kind of like in a twist. And those 2 twists of metal are what are keeping the center stone in the middle. For me, it's not a style that I necessarily I'm super crazy about, but it does have a cool look. It does create a bit of a heavier ring. and your ring will also be set probably a lot lower. You're not going to be able to have that exposed center stone like if you were to do it with prongs. So yeah, I'd love to also know what style you guys like the most, what you guys are thinking for your engagement ring. And I just want to do a little shout out for our Instagram because we do have a lot of short form content. So on our YouTube channel, we do a lot of like more in-depth videos, but if you're someone who really loves, you know, 1 minute little fun educational videos, definitely stop over to our Instagram, Fine and Flux. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to do a custom signed piece with us, send us a DM, send us an email, the links are down below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.